Afternoon, Mark.
Mark.
We can start now, Chair.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you, Kath. Welcome to the Environment and Sustainability Scrutiny Committee being held via the Microscope Teams today, Tuesday, the 8th of February 2022, to consider the matters contained in the following agenda. This meeting will be recorded and made available via the Council's website, except for the discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and audio of these individuals speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council website, www.caerphilly.gov.uk. Apologies, number one. We've had 5 apparently. Beck?
Yes, Chair, I can give you those. It's Councillor Mark Evans, Councillor John Roberts, Councillor Julian Simmons, Councillor June Stone and Councillor Tom Williams.
Any other apologies? No. Item 2, declaration of interest. Council and officers a reminder of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interests in respect of any of the items of business on this agenda in accordance with Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both the councillors and the officers. Anyone got any declaration of interest?
Is it, Tudor, is it worth declaring? Because with the item on agenda item 8, I'm chair of governors and a parent.
And you've been involved with discussions on this, have you?
Well, yes, from the inset.
Kath?
Chair, I would say you can record it as personal, but it wouldn't be prejudicial. Chair, is obviously in your role as a governor, you've been appointed by the local authority, so you're fine to participate.
All right, thanks. Beth,
All right then. Quite happy with that?
Yep.
Right, item 3. To approve and sign the following minutes. The Environment Sustainability Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 7th of December 2021, pages 1 to 6. For accuracy, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Someone move it as a true record otherwise?
I move that, Chair.
Is that seconded?
I'll second, Chair.
We go to the vote then, Kath. Kath?
Yes, Chair, will appear in front of you now, members.
Right, please record your vote.
That's moved, Chair.
That's moved. Right. Right, item 4. Consider any matters referred to this committee in accordance with the calling procedures. I understand there's none, Kath?
That's correct, Chair. There's none.
Then we go to item 5, Environment Sustainability Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Programme, which is pages 7 to 18. Kath?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would just direct members to Appendix 1 of the report on page 11. You can see the next meeting of the Scrutiny Committee is on the 22nd of March 2022. We have one item planned for that meeting, which is the tips inspection and maintenance update. We don't have any others at the moment, but there will be one information item in your packs being sent out by email, which will be the Budget Monitoring Report Period 9. And that will be your last meeting before the elections, members. So if any additions or suggestions for additional items, if members could just advise us. Thank you.
Anyone got any items? If not tonight, please forward them to Kath, all right? So I move the report. Is that seconded?
Seconded, Chair.
Seconded?
Yeah, second.
Right, right. We go to the vote. You got it on your screen.
That's smooth, Chair. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Make sure we get the next. Right, item 6. Any call-ins on the cabinet? Kath?
No, none, Chair.
Thank you. Right, then we go to item 7 to receive the notice of motion, crossing patrols policy, pages 19 to 24. Councillor Hetheridge,
Thank you.
welcome.
Could I thank Councillor Davis for allowing me to speak to this notice of motion? Just a bit of a history about this notice of motion. This all came about because of the withdrawal of the crossing lady at Blackwood. There's a 210 petition underway, but the notice of motion goes a bit further than that. The notice of motion is a strategic motion. Members will not remember, because I wasn't elected in 2014, but the policy in 2014 was agreed by the Education for Life Scrutiny Committee. So the policy on crossing ladies have not been looked at until since 2014. Jamie, the cabinet member, will probably say that the policy meets the national criteria. Now, I do appreciate that, but when you look at the actual notice of motion, I look at every school in the county borough. If a crossing lady actually retires or moves to another job, there's an evaluation then by the highways officers of whether the crossing lady should be returned or not. When the evaluation was done at Blackwood, and it goes, as I say, goes a bit further than this, there was lack of engagement with the school staff and governors.
Councillor Etheridge, could I speak to the notice of motion? You've got it in writing for Blackwood, but now please stick to the notice of motion generally, right?
Yeah, okay. What I believe, Chair, is there should be, where a crossing lady is withdrawn or retires in any school, there should be a consultation questionnaire to the parents. We need to look at the formula, and we need to look at the threshold and the procedure. As I say, it has not been reviewed since 2014. The officers, the highways officers, look at children going through the main entrance. Now, in a number of schools in the county borough, there are side entrances. None of the children there were actually looked at. In some schools, there are nursery children and there are breakfast clubs, and they may go, as they do in my school, they may go through a different entrance. So they are not counted as well. And what I'm looking for is a partnership approach with the council, community safety. We've only got 8 wardens, so they can't be there all the time if the crossing lady is withdrawn. There's no appeals procedure, but I do believe, Chair, that this actual study was done in the middle of the pandemic. And what I would like, it's actually only done, the children only counted 50 yards from the school entrance. So, if there's a crossing lady or no crossing lady, where you've got children crossing the road and going in through the other entrances, they are actually not looked at. Like you all, I believe children must be protected in all schools, and that is why, Chair, I would like the policy, the whole policy and the criteria and the procedures, the formula actually reviewed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge. Councillor Jamie Pritchard.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'll make it brief, and thank you for the for accepting me to reply to the notice of motion. All I say is, thank you, Councillor Etheridge, for agreeing to meet with me last Thursday. As you know, we try and proactively discuss these issues as they arise. But for the committee's if the committee wants to look into this, I mean, as Councillor Etheridge has said, this was last reviewed in 2014. I was actually a member of the Education for Life Scrutiny Committee then, 2 years into being a member. But as Councillor Etheridge has said, this is about national guidelines. And so for the local authority is applying these national guidelines. It's not something that we've plucked out of the air. 2014, I appreciate, is 8 years ago. So you may think, well, there could be a possible change. We might have to review things, but as things currently are, we are applying national guidelines. If the local authority wanted to go away from this, my understanding is we'd have to make a bespoke sort of way of looking into this away from national guidelines. Is that responsible? Is that going to be difficult? Will that involve a lot of officer time? Probably. What I'd be interested in from Councillor Etheridge or members of the committee is to consider what actually, you know, if you're minded to look into this again, what actually you're trying to sort of achieve above and beyond what is actually the current policy and has been for some time. You could look at the current policy and say, well, it's 8 years old, but is it 8 years old for a good reason? You know, do we have to change it every couple of years? Do things have to be reviewed every 18 months or something? So what I'd like the committee to consider, if they are minded to offer any changes, or if they're not, is to think of what we really want out of this. You know, if the policy ain't broke, you know, don't fix it. But if you feel the policy needs changing, well, obviously that's up to yourselves as members to consider in response to the notice of motion. But I'll leave it there, Chair. Obviously, it's up for the Scrutiny Committee to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mark Williams, you wanted to... Mark?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, couldn't get my camera working. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I basically going to reiterate what Councillor Jamie Pritchard has said, in that obviously the authority applies national guidelines that are used throughout the UK by other local authorities. So we haven't deviated from that. We haven't devised our own scheme. These are tried and tested guidelines. The scoring methodology is tried and tested and employed throughout the UK. We can't change those national guidelines. They are what they are, and it's what everyone else applies. I don't know whether Marcus Lloyd wants to add anything. Marcus is also here, Chair.
Yes, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair.
Could you explain what the criteria is?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. As Mark has pointed out, and obviously Councillor Etheridge and Councillor Pritchard, these are national guidelines. We are applying them. Although the policy was endorsed in 2014, the actual guidelines were updated in 2016, and we are applying the new guidelines. So it's the guidelines are continually reviewed nationally and updated, and as they are, we will then apply them because they are the guidelines that have been endorsed. So I know Councillor Etheridge mentioned that we only consider main entrances. It's not a main entrance we consider the crossing point. Now, the crossing point could take into account other entrances. And what we do with all of these is, at that point in time, we will assess the crossing point to see how many people cross. We also take into account the number of vehicles that use the road, the speed of vehicles, the width of the road, the width of the footways. All of these factors are built into the assessment. So it is a very robust assessment that's undertaken. And also, if there's a change in factors after the assessment's undertaken, we're more than happy to undertake a review. So although assessment may be undertaken today on, for example, Blackwood, as Councillor Etheridge has pointed out, if there is a change in circumstance, we would redo the assessment. And if they then met the criteria, we would reintroduce the school crossing patroller. So it's not a decision that's cast in stone. Once they've gone for good. It is an assessment that we're more than happy to revisit as and when circumstances do change. But it is a very robust assessment, as I pointed out, and takes into a huge number of factors, including casualty statistics as well.
Thank you. Colin Aylesbury.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just picking up on something. The new highway code came in, I think it was last Saturday, which basically puts pedestrians at the top of the tree. So the pedestrians are the number one, they rule the road now, and everything else is underneath. I think it's cyclists, horse riders, then I think it's buses, then I think it's cars. Do you know if these guidelines that we're implementing for crossing patrols, are they going to be updated to reflect that? Has there been any suggestion of that, any conversation regarding that? Because obviously, if these guidelines were updated in 2016, we've now moved on with this new highway code. So I'm just wondering whether that's a road that we're going to excuse the pun. That's a route, sorry, that we're going to go down.
Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. In response to that, I'm not sure that there's a review underway regarding the change in the highway code, but if there is, we can look into that and find that information out for you. But what I would say is that, as members will probably be aware, the new 20-mile-an-hour zones are being progressed at the moment. So that's going to impact on all of our residential areas. We're working through the guidelines that are being published by Welsh Government, and that's looking to be implemented sometime during 2023, probably the summer-ish, depending on how long that takes. But it is governed by the information coming out of Welsh Government at the moment. But that's going to bring in an additional safety factor in all our residential areas, because everything will then be 20 mile an hour as well.
Okay, all right, thank you, Marcus.
Sorry.
Thanks, Chair.
Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I can see that Mark Williams has also put his hand up again. I don't know whether he's got anything to answer to the.
All right. Do you want to delay you?
I'm happy to give way.
We give way. Mark.
Thanks, Councillor Adams. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to confirm that Marcus's team have liaised with Blackwood Primary and have agreed to reassess the site, once the COVID circumstances have changed. So there will be a reassessment of Blackwood. That's been agreed with the school. I believe Marcus, Councillor Etheridge has also been notified of that.
Yeah, Councillor Etheridge was in the email correspondence that went back and forth between the school, and yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that clarification, although I can see Councillor Etheridge shaking his head a bit there. One of the things for Councillor Etheridge to remember, you only talked about crossing patrol ladies. I'm sure, Marcus, you can confirm if we still have a few gentlemen playing that trade. So I know I've seen a few about. Anyway, thanks for the explanations of how we've moved on from 2014 and the 2016. We'll be looking at any implications, I'm sure, with the new highway code. It's seemed to confuse quite a few people. If there's any reaction for what we need to be doing as a result of new guidelines on there, I'm sure we'll take that up as soon as possible. But this isn't only just about Blackwood, it's about all the schools that we have. And I know of a few with different entrances, and I'm sure not all of the children actually come to that crossing point with their parents. They'll go to something a bit nearer. So it's a very wide-ranging issue that we have to take into account whatever decision we make. I can see that we've got at least one other councillor wants to make a contribution, but Chair, can I give notice that I would say that we can stay as we are at the moment with all the comments that we've had, and that we don't need to change the policy.
Are you moving that we don't support the notice of motion? Yeah, you're muted, Mike. You're muted.
Sorry.
You're muted.
Right. Well, I muted for all of that then, or did I?
No, yes, on then.
I'm prepared to move that we don't need to change the policy because of all the comments that we've had tonight, and that we continue to review when we believe necessary.
So you're moving that we don't support the notice of motion?
Is
that seconded?
Second, I'd say Councillor Peace second that, Chair.
Right, all right, but that's
Thank you,
just,
Chair.
right, Bob?
I have had my hand up as well, Chair.
Well, it doesn't come on here. I don't know where your hand is. It's not up.
Well,
It's
it's
on the
there.
screen.
I've been there right from the beginning, Chair. You know.
Right. I can't miss you out. Don't worry. I know. Right, Bob Owen.
Yeah, so I'm just coming in. I was
It's all right, Bob.
my mouse wasn't working on the computer. Yeah, one of the things I was going to ask was about a reassessment, which has been answered, which is good, in as much as that we will get a reassessment of the situation at Blackwood, which
with all due respect, Bob, we're not talking about Blackwood. We're talking about the notice of
no,
motion.
exactly, no, exactly.
please,
but no, I'm just
we
saying that
we don't accept individual,
yeah,
matters.
no,
You can open the door that everyone who has this situation, we put in notice of motions, and it's not relevant to the committee.
No, all I wanted to say, Chair, is the fact that there's a reassessment is good for, that there could be issues there or whatever. But from a point of view of just general crossings throughout the borough, again, as you know, they're at all schools. I think that everybody likes the lollipop lady or lollipop men. We just had the thing about the speeds of traffic and everything, and the fact that pedestrians, are now getting, bigger sort of press in the highway code. But clearly, keeping these people, I mean, what we're trying to do around these schools is to stop people from bringing the cars, because we've had that again in Risca and the other schools on the trial. So we're trying to get people to get the kids to school, using foot transport as opposed to in the cars and whatever. And clearly, if that happens, we're going to actually have an increase. So if we're going to have an increase, clearly there's going to be more people to be managed to cross roads. So, the reason I support this is because of specifically to cut down on the traffic and to actually, to keep the people in place then to look after the children crossing the road.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. Anyone else? No one else has indicated.
Yes, Tudor, I did.
Oh, sorry.
We got Denver.
The golfer. I forgot about Denver.
Thank you. I thought I got looking at my ball all night. I thought he was like me, Tudor. No, I think a bit of information, really. Obviously, the policy is looked at on a regular basis, hopefully. Does this mean, Chair, that, anything that happens, like say from 2014 to 2016, it is automatically looked at by our officers to see exactly what did happen and if any improvements can be made? And to just assume that every crossing has to have a lady or a man there attending it, that's great if you only have one crossing. But what I can see of it, correct me if I'm wrong, is parents and pupils can willy-nilly have any entrance they'd like into any school. I think before we go any further, we ought to establish one entrance, one patrol officer. Thank you, Chair, and perhaps I can have a bit of advice on that.
Marcus?
Thank you, Chair. I think generally there was main entrances before, Councillor, but because of the situation with COVID and social distancing, a number of schools now are using multiple entrances to socially distance. So children are using multiple entrances into the school. But should, as I mentioned earlier, situations change, we're more than happy to undertake reassessments at any point in time.
And that's
because what would come in there, Chair, bit of information I hope would come there. Just how many entrances are there other than the stipulated one, like it used to be before, like in my schools? How many have we got? I think that's the sort of thing we have to look at. Would you know anything about that, Marcus?
Obviously, every school will be different. So some schools may have 4 or 5 entrances, some may only have 1. But what we've got to look at is generally if the school frontage, and these are generally the primary schools, not much more than 100 metres or so long. And Councillor Etheridge mentioned that we look at around 50 metres or so. So it's that crossing point should then factor into people if they want to use either the main entrance or use the side entrances, because it's a reasonable distance of the school frontage. What we can't cater for is generally most of these children arrive at school with their parents, parents not prepared to walk up to where the school crossing patrol point is and crossing at another location. So, but the school crossing patrol point of the crossing is assessed to be at the safest point to cross the road for those children.
Fine, thank you for that, Chair. Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Well, as you've been told, any school that feel they want a reassessment is a matter of going through the procedure through the officers. The officers. Right, anyone else? Kath, are we going to have a recorded vote on this one by your or?
I can do a roll call, Chair, if that's easier.
Yes, I thought you might have had the,
We can do it on forms if you want.
Well, right, we'll do it on
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So that the motion for members, we've had it moved and seconded that the notice of motion is not supported.
So if you support it or you don't support it, please vote yes or no.
If you don't support it, vote yes.
Can I have clarification of that, Kath? I want to support the original
In
motion.
that case, yeah, when the motion that's been moved, Councillor Owen, was to not support it. So we have to deal with that first. If that's successful, the original motion falls by the wayside.
That's right.
That's not, Kath, that's not what the form says, mine. The form says to support the notice of motion, yes or no.
It says to not support the notice of motion.
No, it says
I'm looking at it. It says to support the notice of motion, yes or no.
Yeah, if you look at the forms on the screen, is that correct, Beck?
Kath, for clarity, we can put a new one in. I think there's been the forms have got overlapped.
Okay, I can see one that says to not support it, Chair.
Oh, well, the one that's on my screen says agenda item 7 to support the notice of motion, yes, no, or abstain. So
okay,
and that's my understanding that you vote for it or you're against it.
Let me just get that. We get the new vote up, Chair, just
and
to be absolutely sure.
We've had plenty of experience of this over the last few months on notice of motions.
Okay,
surely,
Chair.
I was going to say, surely if you don't support it, you just vote no.
Well,
that's
as far as
correct.
I can.
Yeah, but
right.
that's not, Kath, that's not the advice you gave. The advice you gave is if you don't support it, vote yes.
That's right, because the motion is to not support it.
Well,
so
that's not what it said on the screen.
It said on mine. It does say it says to not support.
No, it says to support the notice of motion on mine.
I think people are seeing.
Yeah,
speak to you.
Thank you.
I'm seeing what you're saying, Kath.
Can I take it over now with the chair? There was
should we do a roll call, Chair?
It was moved and seconded that we don't support the notice of motion. We have gone to a vote.
The second one has come up.
We've gone to the vote, and if you are in support of the motion that we don't support, you put down yes. If you don't agree with that, you put no. So, it's as simple as that. It's a straightforward vote.
So I want to vote against, so I'm going to vote yes. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's
right.
The forms that's now on our screens.
So if you support the recommendation, I would say that we don't support it, you press yes. If you don't agree with that, you press no. Okay? So please do it again.
Right, Chair, the proposal to not support the notice of motion is agreed by the majority. So therefore, the notice of motion fails.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Etheridge. It'll now be referred to Council.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for your contribution on that one. Not easy one, but we've done it. If I can go to item 8, the review of the experimental pedestrian and cycle zones outside schools, in brackets, school streets, pages 25 to 106. Jamie Pritchard, you want to present?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to update Scrutiny Committee on the effectiveness and outcomes of the experimental pedestrian and cycle zone traffic regulation orders implemented outside 3 primary schools and to seek their views on the schemes. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about unprecedented changes that has affected all aspects of transport. We've seen large reductions and changes in motorised traffic on all parts of the road network, which has reduced much patronage on buses and trains and high levels of home working. I know all members would have had cause to respond to complaints about parking outside schools, not just for the inconvenience this brings, but also to the damage to the local environment brought by running engines. So in order to support these changes, the Welsh Government released funding in 2020 to local authorities, Local Sustainable Transport Response Fund, to implement pop-up measures, low-cost solutions to reallocate road space in favour of sustainable forms of transport. A proportion of funding was allocated to the council to support schemes at 4 primary schools within the borough: Libanus Primary School, Risca Primary School, Toyn Primary School and Aberbargoed Primary School. The schemes prohibited vehicles driving alongside the roads immediately adjacent to the roads at school start and finish times. The experimental schemes appear to have been generally well received within their respective communities, and most of the survey respondents felt that the schemes provided some overall benefits and should remain in place. I do, however, understand that enforcement difficulties have been raised as an issue by Gwent Police, and that's noted within the report, despite the force being generally in favour of the intentions of the scheme. With this in mind, I would welcome any discussions with Gwent Police, any local councillors and governors about what we can collectively do to promote the concept of safe access to the schools in question. Initial consultation with local members and the prior cabinet member took place in June 2020, where no objections were received. In July 2020, statutory consultation with the emergency services and statutory bodies, community and town councils and affected schools. Again, no objections were received. The report outlines responses from local members following the introduction of the scheme, in which several points on design and enforcement issues were raised by local members. On December the 9th, 2021, a summary of comments received from public notice and open online questionnaires were sent to local members for the Blackwood, St Martin's and Risca West wards, as well as myself as Cabinet Member for Infrastructure and Property. The report outlines the 2 comments from local members in response to the summary sent out on December the 9th. No local member has asked for any of the proposals to be withdrawn. The active encouragement to provide traffic-free environments around schools is something that I'm sure all local members will want to see. The benefits for the local environment and safer access to schools has been the key driver of this policy. On June the 4th, 2019, the Council declared a climate emergency. It's important that we do everything that we possibly can to reduce carbon emissions across the borough. The recommendations are outlined in 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3, where members are asked to offer their views of officers' recommendations that the experimental traffic regulations orders, pedestrian and cycle zones or one-way traffic, should be made permanent. Members are asked to offer their views on officers' recommendations that no new additional pedestrian and cycle zones should be considered for other schools within the borough as part of a future programme of works at this point in time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mark, you wanted to come in first? Mark? Mr. Williams? No? Marcus?
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to support what the Cabinet member said. He's covered that very concisely. The introduction of the School Streets Initiative is obviously given priority to pedestrians. Some of the issues we've had and feedback is that is regarding enforcement, as Councillor Pritchard pointed out, and because they move in traffic offences, it's Gwent Police who have to enforce. Unfortunately, we can't undertake that ourselves. And Gwent Police resources are stretched. They've undertaken 4 initiatives at each of 2 of the schools, which went down very well with enforcement. But obviously, it's having that commitment to have that resource there continually is the issue. Other than that, I would fully endorse what's been said, that this obviously goes to improve road safety around our schools.
Thank you, Marcus. Right, the first comment questions is Steve Kent.
Oh, thank you. I got to disagree with you there, Marcus, because we've had so many near misses where the headmaster is. I can only speak for Tyne School, sorry, because I don't understand the problems in other areas. But last week we had an incident with a car parked and a young child coming out of nursery on where cars are double parked, and the mother just had time to grab the child before the car reversed, and it would have hit him. It would have gone over him. That we got no enforcement at all. This scheme was put in place. The original email came off Rachel on 20th of June last year, saying the scheme would not be put in place until we got assurances of Gwent Police that enforcement action would be taken. We had one day, I believe, back in April last year. That was the last we saw them. We have police down there yesterday. They moved 2 cars who were parked on the pavement and ignored everyone contravening the Road Traffic Act. We have Dean came down a week before Christmas, had Dean Smith down there, and he said, I can see the problems. He said it's just not going to go away. I think the scheme is great in it's not great in its current form, and it needs to be enhanced. And I think the only way we can do this now, and to get parents hitting them in the pocket, is put cameras in. But I said only by using cameras and retrospective fining will we be able to stop people driving down these roads. It is dangerous. There's cars parked everywhere. There's 7, 8 cars parked in bus stops on zigzags every single day in Tyne. There's been quite a few nearly come to blows as well between parents, because tempers are starting to get frayed. Then the police will come. It's getting to the point now. It does. I saw in my email I sent that's in the report. It seems to be like we had the money, we had to spend it, with no forethought on how it was going to be enforced, who was going to police it, how we could change it and tweak it to make it better to ensure that this road closure order was fit for purpose. Everyone ignores it. It's breaking the contravening the Road Traffic Act. It's a criminal offence. That's the only way I got police up there, was because I kept saying that they're committing a criminal offence. They could not refuse to come, but we've had them there once in the last 2 years. So could our officers sort of not implore them, I suppose, is instruct them, saying it's their responsibility. We can't stop a moving vehicle. I understand that. PCSOs can't stop a moving vehicle. Only a PC, fully fledged police officer, can stop a moving vehicle. There was 21 cars went down that road this morning. And it's getting to the point now where I don't know what can be done. It's like we've either got to enhance the scheme, leave it as it is, and hopefully it's a minor, very minor, with a little M improvement. But if we enhance it, we've got the power there to really make children's lives safer around these schools.
All right, Steve.
Yeah, thank you.
Marcus, you want to come in on that first?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can't disagree with anything Councillor Kent stated. Road safety is a priority. If we didn't have the scheme in place, I think it would be worse. I know you said that there's only a minor improvement, but any improvement's got to be an improvement. But unfortunately, if we had the powers, we could look to undertake more enforcement. But obviously, we've got to be reliant, because they move in traffic offences, on Gwent Police supporting it. Their comments are that they wouldn't, although they recognise the scheme and what it's trying to achieve, that they just haven't got the resources to support it. And that's why the other recommendation is in the report, that we don't, at this point in time, recommend rolling this out further, because obviously the resources from the police are not there to undertake the enforcement that is required.
Can I come back, please, too? Can I come back, please?
Yeah.
Could we look into the possibility of, in these 4 locations, of using cameras? There's the vehicle movements past these schools. Libanus has got 100, average of 100. We've got average of 73. The smaller schools up in the 30s. This is only it's only a 3/4-hour road closure. Of putting cameras in and retrospective fining. If everyone who contravened that order received a letter saying you've got 7 days to prove you've got a parking permit for that street or are a blue badge holder. If not, hit them with a fine. Surely that would pay for itself within 18 months, 2 years. This is something that wipe its own bum.
Marcus?
That's something that we can look at. I don't believe we got the powers for that at the moment. We would have to work with GoSafe and the police on that. But I'm more than happy to undertake the research on how we could go about that, Councillor Kent, and work with yourself on it.
I'd appreciate that. It'd be interesting to see that one, because if there's anything else we can do to sort of expand these schemes from their, I suppose, their infancy, and make them further reaching and make them harder hitting. And only then will the message get out: you do not drive down these roads at these times.
I think a point, Steve, at the end of the day, this is a pilot scheme basically of 3 now, not 4. And it's got to be monitored and see what comes out of that. And if there's any lessons to be learned, I'm sure the officers, in the interest of safety, I'm sure the officers are going to be, approached on those, and they've got to be discussed.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Mike Adams. These are the pre questions on the pre-meeting, which only a few turned up, so they got the opportunity.
Yeah, I made the point about Libanus Primary, which many Pontypridd children attend, and I went out around there yesterday, and for much of the time of this exercise, it's been a success. Perhaps not 100%, but very successful. But many of those parents who drive their children to school are in the fortunate position of having 2 very adjacent car parks, which currently, of course, are free to use. We have the task force going into car parking, specifically around Blackwood and other towns in Caerphilly. If that comes back to reimpose parking, that will have a major effect on the freedom of many of those parents to park away from the school road. So that could well see a change in attitude. So that may be pretty unique in that close location to how this can be opposed. One of the things about Steve Kent's proposal there, just to look at 3 schools to put parking cameras and then find people. Won't every other parent at other schools, apart from those 3, be thinking how lucky we are? And the ones who are caught out be thinking, gosh, why am I being picked on when this should be round out all around the council, all around Caerphilly? Thank you very much, Chair.
Right, Alan Collis.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight that I've been a governor at Aberbargoed Primary School for more than 20 years. I've been chair of governors for over 10 years. I've stepped down now because I'm on so many different committees. I was unable to attend various meetings. But with the parking issue, there is no parking spot for these cars outside the school, and I work closely with the police and the local council to put in place double yellow lines. But these cars are now illegally parking on the double yellow lines, and it worries me because children are in terrible danger. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, it's a matter you should take up with enforcement officers, all right, Alan?
Indeed, yes.
Okay. I know you're no longer in the scheme now, but okay.
Yeah.
Right, Colin Ellsbury.
Thanks, Chair. I think the scheme is great in theory, but it's obviously fundamentally flawed because it needs police officers to enforce it. And as the report says, you know, at one point there were 12 officers from Gwent and Caerphilly on one day, and that's an awful lot of resources. I would pick up on what Steve said about camera enforcement. At the end of the day, this scheme is in place. It only affects 4 schools. We need to see if it works with camera enforcement. My question to Marcus is are we giving feedback, A, to the Welsh Government on this, and B, is there any way that our civil parking enforcement officers can have more powers, or is that
you're on mute now, Colin.
Froze you all. You froze.
I'm having problems. I am had problems.
You back in? All right.
Am I back in?
Yes.
Sorry, I have had problems last week with this. But yeah, is there any way that we can get our civil parking enforcement officers to have more powers, or is that going to be a national thing?
If I can come in on that then, Chair.
Yes, you can, Marcus.
There are opportunities that can be explored with Welsh Government with regards to transfer of powers. It's something that Cardiff have already taken on board, as some of you may be aware and may have been caught yourselves on box junctions and those sorts of things. I know the director has, and he's on the call at the moment, where Cardiff can undertake that enforcement themselves of a moving traffic offence. But it's quite a lengthy process to go through, and obviously we need to look at the commitment that's required from officers as well to implement something like that, and the benefits that we would get. But it is, as I mentioned to Councillor Kent, I'm more than happy to look at researching more into that and seeing what opportunities there are, because there are definitely opportunities there that we could consider.
Yeah, I'd ask for that, please, because I know you say it's a lot more work, but once the work is done, that's going to be there for life. And I do support this scheme, and I would like to see it rolled out to every school. I think it's a great idea, especially now, you know, going forward with transport and the highway code, and the fact that, yeah, we need to cut our carbon emissions and get people walking to school. You know, have people forgotten what their legs are for? You know, let's get there. But yeah, thanks for the report, and any information you can get that brings us forward, drives it forward, please, yeah, carry on. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you, Colin, for that. I'm sure the officers appreciate that. Bob? Bob Owen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, you know, when this first come on board, very positive, and, you know, seeing what we could do around these schools and whatever. It's a bit of a chicken and egg for me, because with lots of positives, there's also quite a few negatives locally. So it's very hard to sort of, and after what Stephen said about, you know, with cameras, because I've had lots of information coming through about chock-a-block roads. We've got a one-way system as a result, which seems to be working fairly well. People are quite happy with that. As long as we can, you know, we can stop the traffic coming up the wrong way. We still got some problems there. But from the environmental aspects, it's funny that on all of the respondents is like the majority risk of primary, no effect on road safety, has no effect on traffic congestion, no change of air quality, no change in the local environment. So, I mean, everything there is no change. So, with the issues I'm having from residents as well, because again, it says in the report that a lot of the problems are with the residents and the local parking. It's really hard for me to, you know, I've got people saying the positives and people saying the negatives. So, although I'm sort of for it, I'm a little bit concerned in going with it then from my own point of view and my own residents. But the one thing again is, if there was any way we could get some CCTV that would clamp down and sort of bring down the issues, I'd be all up for that. So it's more comments than questions, really. But a very good report, and thank you to the people who've put it together.
Thank you, Bob. Much obliged. Denver? You muted, you muted.
Yeah, fine. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think what we've got to look at here, mine. I agree with the recommendation, because at the end of the day, I know Steve or someone said earlier on, we can't recommend against a law. We got a law there. I suppose you've seen that. Asked anybody, I would 100%. What do you think of yellow lines? I know what they'd say to you. But sometime or other, especially when it comes to outside of schools, we have to enforce it. So all we are asking really is for people to realise that they are breaking the law. Full stop. And they're only breaking the law, and we are trying to protect our pupils going to school. So I'm sorry, I'm all for what the recommendation is, and use the law if need be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Steve, hang on, I want to know if anyone else, you've spoken once, so I just want to find out any other members want to make any contribution or questions. If not, Steve, I'll give you another bite of the cherry, as long as it's not the same thing. Is it something different?
No, it's similar. When we use, I said we mentioned CCTV and cameras, but I'm asking about, is it a cost on AMPR per annum, or is it a one-off cost? Because I know some supermarkets use it, some certain buildings use it. But that's the type of thing. We got a database, because we know people who have parking permits, we know people who have disabled badges, we know basically the residents in the cars. But would AMPR be a viable option, or is that an expensive option?
To tell you the truth, Councillor Kent, I've never looked into the provision of ANPR. It's not something we've considered anyway. But again, we can look into that. I am aware from my own estate that there's some antisocial behaviour, and I know they're working with the PCSOs and looking for houses to contribute to an ANPR on the access road into the estate where I live. Probably, I'm trying to guess off the top of my head, probably 400 houses on the estate, and they're looking for a yearly contribution. So there must be ongoing costs as well from that. But we can find out some more information on it as part of the research we'll undertake.
My thought was, because we haven't got the power to do anything with moving traffic, obviously a camera would pick up moving traffic, and therefore the enforcement couldn't come from us. The enforcement would still have to come from the police, wouldn't it? Yes. It wouldn't be something where we issue parking tickets now with our civil enforcement officers. That money comes back to the council.
Correct.
So if there's a camera, if there's a camera system or any ANPR to pick up these moving violations, that wouldn't come back to the council then. So the thing we need to look at is getting the money back into the council as well. Yeah,
and that's where I've mentioned that the Cardiff scheme, where they've transferred some powers to Cardiff from the police, and some of the moving traffic offences on yellow boxes and those sorts of things do go back to the authority then, because they've taken over ownership of it. But you've got to go through similar to the civil parking enforcement, where we had to go through an approval process with Welsh Government to allow us to take over those powers. It'd be a similar process we would then have to go through for moving traffic offence transfer of powers.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Tudor.
Anyway, any other member of the committee want to say anything? I notice the cabinet member is seeking to speak again. If not, then Jamie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Obviously, I preempted this by knowing that there was going to be some issues around enforcement, having read the report and picked up on what members have said before. Just to re-emphasise, in my role as cabinet member, I'm more than happy to meet with any of the local councillors or any of the governors on the 3 schools, that have been mentioned. There have been a number of considered points that have been made, which I think have been made very well. And if there's anything that I can do, please, members, get in touch, and I'll be feeding back to highways officers following this meeting. So thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Well, all your points and comments will be recorded anyway and be looked at when it goes to cabinet. Okay. So the observations. No other members have seek to speak. So can I move on page 26, the recommendation which goes to the cabinet, 3.2 and 3.3. Is that seconded? Is that seconded?
I'll second, Chair.
Right.
Yeah.
We got to vote on this.
Yes, members, if you just keep an eye on the forms in front of you.
Is everyone able to vote? Anyone got any difficulties?
100%, Chair.
I know it's 100%, but I don't mean to say that someone may be still struggling. Okay, so that's been passed.
Yes, Chair, that's moved.
Thank you for that. Right, we go to the next item now, item 9. On page 107, Economy and Environmental 2021-22 Budget Monitoring Report, period 7. Dave Roberts.
Councillor Whitcomb was going to introduce it, Chair.
Oh, Whitcomb, I forgot. He's very quiet and it's unusual for him, but
Thank you, Chair.
sorry about that. He was, so enthralled with other things. Right, Councillor Whitcomb.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to inform members of the projected revenue expenditure for the Economy and Environment Directorate for the 2021-22 financial year. Service divisions include Regeneration and Planning Division, Infrastructure Services Division, Public Protection Division, and Community and Leisure Services Division. The report summarises the most recent budget monitoring projections for 21-22 based on the latest available financial information. The attached appendices outline the more detailed budget monitoring figures for each of the council fund services outlined in paragraph 1.1 and above. The recommendation is contained at 3.1, and Chair, I ask you to note that it's for noting only. And obviously, Dave is here if anybody's got any detailed questions. Thank you, Chair.
Right, anyone got any questions on this report? Dave, do you want to say any comments on this? Dave Roberts?
No, nothing further to add, thank you.
Can I ask a quick one to you, please?
Well, yes, you can ask a question. That's what's about.
I'm just flicking between screens from the agenda on the Teams meeting at the moment. It's on the Community and Leisure Services, and it's on 542 that I picked up, where we got a 13,000 overspend on bulky waste collection. Is projecting a 13,000 overspend. Is that due to collecting fly tipping, or is that due to people not paying? So you wanted to picked up on it. It's on 54 Community and Leisure Services.
Dave, any comments?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but I'm willing to come back to you outside of the meeting.
Yeah, that'd be fine, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Circulate that to all the members then, will you please?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. Anyone else got any questions? Right, as noted, it's noted. Okay, there's no vote on that. We go item 10, Directorate Performance Assessment for Economy and Environmental Services, 6 months up to date, 2021-22, pages 123 to 178. Andrew, I will remember this time.
Thank you very much, Chair. The purpose of the report is to present scrutiny with the 6-month Economy and Environment Directorate Performance Assessment Report, which is part of the Council's Performance Management Framework. The performance assessment referred to in the document as the DPA hereafter is the Directorate's self-assessment and forms part of the Council's overall self-assessment activity. It provides information and analysis for the 6-month period from April to September 21. Members are invited to discuss, challenge and scrutinise the range of information in the DPA. The Council's revised performance framework was endorsed by Cabinet in February 2020
and the report introduces one of the key components of the framework, the Directorate Performance Assessment. The DPA is a self-assessment of the Directorate's progress across a wide range of information types and meets our duty as a principal council to keep our performance under review and scrutiny. DPA is an opportunity to bring together a range of information and intelligence in one picture, to answer the self-assessment questions of how well are we performing, how do we know, and what and how we can do to do better. Appendix 1 is the Economy and Environment Services Performance Assessment 6-month update for 2021-22, and the services within the remit of the Scrutiny Committee include infrastructure, community and leisure service, public protection, and land and property services. The Regeneration and Planning Service is the remit of the Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you.
The recommendations at 3.1.
Oh, you're finished. Right. Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Mark, do you want to make any comments?
No, Chair, I was going to sort of remind members that obviously planning and regen, their Directorate Performance or elements of the Directorate Performance Assessment relating to them was considered by the Housing and Regen Scrutiny Committee just last week. So as Councillor Whitcomb has said, this focuses on the infrastructure division, public protection and community and leisure services. Both the heads of service, Marcus Lloyd and Rob Hartshorn, are present tonight, and between us we can deal with any questions that members have, Chair.
All right, any members got any questions or observations? None? Ask again, just to make sure. Anyone want to make any comments or question the officers? Then we agree, we note that report. All agree? There's no vote on it, just to note it. Okay. Well, that's the end of the agenda. Thank you very much for attending and a great contribution this evening. I got to say that the members are being very reaching, and the officers have responded very well.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night, Chair. Thank you. Good night,
Good night,
Chair.
everyone.
Good night, all.